to just add a quick comment to that. I became really fascinated with right-wing American blogs just before the Iraq War. And in fact, I mean, just about the time I started Danwei, one of the things I got really interested in was right-wing American blogs. And if you go to, there's a blog called littlegreenfootballs.com, or there's an American BBS website called Free Republic. If you go to those two websites and look at the comments, user-generated comments that were left on those websites from 9/11 to in the lead up to the war and then the immediate aftermath of the war, and particularly around the time of the 2004 elections, it does put some perspective about the flinching, the angry Chinese youth, because these are, you know, nice Americans who probably, you know, live in the Midwest and, you know, drive station wagons. And there's some really, truly vile comments on those two websites. So, I mean, I do think it's worth saying it's not just Chinese on the internet. Everybody's rude.
Yeah. And they got George Bush and Dick Cheney partly because of that.
Yes.
And that's the Western media bias right there.
Yeah, the left wing, the progressive media.
Jeremy, go as a but following what you said, I mean, it's something that we have to remember. All these comments and the effect it had on American youth and on the American public led to a war.
Exactly.
So, which is pretty sad, and that's what I was asking about.
Yeah, I actually want to follow up on what they said.
I think this one is good.
5 minutes ago. I think the angry youth phenomenon in China is slightly different because these people, they have more access to information than any previous generations, than my generation, than my parents' generation. It's that they don't choose to. Even if there were no internet, there were no outside information, even if they just read People's Daily, they could have got a lot of knowledge about history, but they choose not to. And that's also a menace, I would call it the biggest menace, that the Western media people either voluntarily or involuntarily wants to avoid. Because the young people who befriend you, the media people, are usually the young people who are very friendly to Western ideas. And but if you go to a campus, any campus, and talk to ordinary people, and read their blogs or forums, you'll really be surprised. It's there are angry youth everywhere in every country, right-wingers everywhere. But I think over here, the sheer number, also the ratio of young people who belong to this category is staggering.
I want to ask Raymond a question. When you say we'll be surprised, tell me, what will we be surprised by? What will we hear that you think we're not hearing?
Because I think the Western media is too focused on a few issues such as human rights and democracy. I'm not suggesting it's wrong, but if you talk to ordinary Chinese, young, middle-aged, you'll probably get a different view of China.
Sure, but I'm asking you to be specific. What? I want to know from Raymond, what do you think that we would hear that we're not hearing, more specifically? Because I'm genuinely interested.
In a typical Chinese website, internet forum, a rational voice will be totally drowned out. In the United States, you have the right-wingers, they say crazy things, but but you also have people who are very rational and discuss things, right? And those people usually have the say. They have bigger voices. But over here, I was just asked by a publisher to compile a collection of opinions, and I couldn't. I searched for 4 months. I couldn't find a single piece online that's not written by a media professional that's worthy collecting to put it in the book. It's that pathetic.
Mine is kind of along the same lines too, because I'm a recent university graduate from America, and even though I'm now studying in China, I think that, because I'm a part of Facebook, of course, which is great when you're talking about blogs, that's a bit shameful, but you see these communities of Chinese students at universities now who are really, I understand what you're saying, that there's a lot of hate out there that really doesn't have any results, But these kids on Facebook, there have been protests, or not protests, but groups that have actually formed from Facebook of children in response, like at university, in response to what's going on now. These Chinese who are coming to America, at least, because that's where my university is. It's small Midwestern, but these groups are forming from these online organizations in response to this Western feel that like they're encountering this Western approach of free Tibet, all of these sentiments, and they're responding to it in actual ways. They're creating actual groups on campuses. They're actually getting together and saying, no, China's, Tibet's always a part of China. So I would argue that I don't think, in what you said earlier, I think that this goes beyond simple young Chinese anger. I think that they're showing results in ways that maybe, like, they're taking this more seriously than I think we give them credit for. So I don't see how you could really have the assumption that this Olympic, this Tibetan situation isn't going to have a negative effect on the Chinese youth in regard to the Western media's approach. So my question is, how can you really think that?
You want to respond to that, John? You haven't talked for a while. Got that nice beard.
I've got to stroke it thoughtfully now. I agree with you. I think it's easy. We can all say that stuff that you see online is just the rabid extremes, but I think that does have an effect on the mainstream a lot of the time. One of the first stories I did when I was in China was a story, this is about 4 years ago, but about the youth and angry youngers, as my assistant translated it at the time. My focus, just a bit of background, I spent 7 years in Japan before I came here, and so I was particularly sensitive to feelings towards Japan in China. It's a very big issue. And when it comes to nationalist feeling, I think this is perhaps the biggest issue, perhaps along with the integrity of what China considers its territory right now. And what you found then, I thought, was online some astonishingly hate-filled websites were allowed to flourish when lots of other kinds of websites were blocked down. And it was almost as if this kind of nationalist sentiment was being encouraged. And you could dismiss it as maybe a few eccentrics, but actually 3 or 4 months later you had, in 2005, these huge demonstrations all over China against Japan. So I think it does have a knock-on effect, and it is something we should be very cautious about indeed.